Well, all this time, or several times, you've mentioned things that haven't made money, but things are thriving here. And what do you publish, and what have you published that's kept you going?
Well, our keystone magazine is Prevention,
Mm-hmm.
which was started in 1950. So we now publish 10 magazines
Okay.
and a lot of books. We cover the basic subjects of health. I think health, not only prevention, but men's health. We have a magazine and some health newsletters, a lot of health books.
Nothing for women's health?
Well, we had a magazine called Women's Health, and it turns out that women are so inundated with health information, and they go to doctors 6 times as much as men,
Mm-hmm.
so they didn't want a magazine. But men are just walking inquiries into health. They don't want to tell their wife that something bothers them, and they don't go to doctors much. So
But they will read.
they will read. So
Mm-hmm.
that's they want to read their own magazine, and that's now quite successful.
So prevention and men's health and any
But
others you
then
want to mention?
we have this whole sports group that I was on the Olympic team in 1968 as a shooter, and that put me in contact with bicycle racers and runners.
I wanted to ask you, if you would, to talk a little bit about the periodicals, the magazines that you publish.
Mhm.
You had mentioned prevention and, of course, organic gardening.
Right, and we have others. American Woodworker, we now publish woodworking,
Oh,
and we're testing a magazine now called Good Spirit. My daughter Heidi is editing it with
Mhm.
me. It's an inspirational magazine. Before you leave, I'll give you a copy. But it's Good Spirit is very important to what I perceive as the future of the organic, sustainable idea, because I think there's definitely a dimension of the spirit in the people's relationship with the land and with gardens
mm-hmm.
and with their environment.
Mhm.
And
This hasn't been talked about very much in the past. Would you
No.
enlarge on that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I just want to say one other thing, that about Rodale Press, the health idea came through as prevention, but it all came from a letter of one reader of organic gardening in 1949 who complained that there was too much health in organic gardening. Said, I thought I was subscribing to a garden magazine, and you got all these articles about the health of food.
Your father must have loved that.
He said, that's all I needed, you know. So he said, I got to start this health magazine. And I told him, I said, I think that's a really bad idea, because it's so controversial. And he said, no, I'm going to do it. And I asked him, I said, what are you going to call it? He said, Prevention. I said, oh, that's a terrible name for a magazine. And he said, no, he sort of smiled and said, just watch what happens. And Prevention was very successful from its first issue in 1950, and that really saved Rodale Press. If it hadn't been for that, we would have gone down the tubes, because the whole work we've done in agriculture and gardening not only never made money, but it's always been very costly.
Mm-hmm.
So the income, or the money that we needed to do the research and to keep the organic gardening going, there were a few years when organic gardening was profitable, but it never really, those are minority times.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the whole history of Rodale Press, this the move into health was extremely important.
And this letter from this reader
Yeah.
back in '49.
Yeah. Now I'm sort of, I assume sometime in the future people are going to be looking at this tape, and but I think 10 years from now, 20, 50 years, people will see the land. If we are successful, basically, in averting environmental disaster, which I think we will be successful, we will see what we do with the land much more in terms of the spirit than we do now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be doing practical things, but we'll be getting as a spiritual experience from this, and we'll be actually following what I call, I'm right in the process right now, I'm coining a bunch of new words, one of which is meta-systematics, meaning how to, I think that one of the predictions I want to make is that the whole land grant system, with all its specialists like plant pathologists, entomologists, agronomists, is going to become a kind of relic. It may exist for a while yet, but I don't see a really bright future
This
for it.
is not going to be popular with some people.
And but there's going to the real leaders, the facilitators of agriculture in the future are going to be what I call meta-systematicians, who are not limited by a specialist focus, who are into systems, but a much broader concept of systems than we have now, getting into the spirit as well as money, resources, and whatever. And that's my prediction for today.
Do you have any particular statements you want to make about the relationship of what's known as organic gardening or organic farming to the wider low-input sustainable, which was LISA, which was what you referred to earlier, low-input sustainable agriculture, the program of the U.S. government?
Well, that's an extremely important question, and people, I keep stating this and defining it, and it's very hard to get across, but there's a real big difference between organic farming and sustainable agriculture or regenerative agriculture.
Yes.
And I spent the first 30 years of my life promoting and working with organic farming, which says to farmers, don't use any artificial fertilizers, any synthetic pesticides, and have a very close relationship with a consumer who appreciates what you're doing. You've got to have it's a consumer-driven activity. The farmer is more ethical, moral, environmental, and match up with a similar consumer. But in 30 years of work, I went from talking to a tiny fraction of a percentage of farmers to maybe 1% of all farmers. So about 1980, at the time the USDA did their first study of organic farming and said there is a little bit of promise here, I said it's time now to invent a concept, a way of talking about these possibilities, these opportunities for environmental, social improvement with all farmers. And that means not asking them to convert to an extreme organic system, but a stepwise conversion into a lower input, which was an idea that my father had too. People asked him, do you expect all farmers to become organic? He said, no, they've got to do it step by step. But he didn't have the conceptual framework to really, he didn't invent the conceptual framework. And so basically, the idea of sustainability, the word sustainable was first used by Abraham Lincoln in 1859 in the context of agriculture, when he warned in Milwaukee that fully mechanized agriculture, a farm based on, big farms based on machines could not sustain themselves. But Lady Balfour in England, Lady Eve Balfour, about 78, started using the term sustainable agriculture to make organic farming sound better, really. And but that began to be picked up, and in the late 70s, early 80s, farmers began and scientists began really working toward the lower input concept.